Today's webinar is about OKRs and specifically top tips on OKRs and based on John Doerr and his best-selling book, Measure What Matters, and actually concepts from other videos that John Doerr has done over the past several years, specifically in reference to OKRs. So let's first talk about who John Doerr is. I'm assuming everyone really knows, but just in case, if somebody's here purely to learn about OKRs and still doesn't know John Doerr, just a really quick bio. He's a world famous and probably one of the top, if not the top, venture capitalist in the world. Certainly, probably the most well known for good reason. He's very, very good investor in some of the top technology companies globally, including the ones you see over here in logos, including Google, Amazon, Twitter, etc. And he started his career at Intel after graduating from Harvard Business School, and he learned objectives and key results, or OKRs, from then CEO of Intel, Andy Grove, who's also one of the most well-known and respected technology industry CEOs and a role model for many CEOs out there. And that's basically how John Doerr started using OKRs, and then he introduced Google to OKRs when he invested in Google. So we'll hear about that as we continue in this presentation. By the way, John Doerr invested in some great companies, but he also, in his bio is a great statistic that these companies have created more than 300,000 jobs, new jobs, which is amazing, right? So he launched this book this year. He wrote this book called Measure What Matters. And I love the subtitle. It's how Google and Bono and Bill Gates Foundation rock the world with OKRs. It's pretty cool, especially Bono and his foundation. I read the book and I've been using OKRs for a while. I've been an OKR, I would say expert. I probably don't want to use the word expert because it sounds selfish or sort of self-indulging. But I think I know quite a lot about OKRs, at a great depth. But when I read John Doerr's book this year, it really reinvigorated me and re-inspired me actually in so many different ways. So he's just a great promoter of this methodology, and I highly recommend this book to anyone if you haven't read it yet. Just a really great business book overarchingly. So Larry Page, who's a co-founder of Google, he said that I wish I had this book 19 years ago when we founded Google. And of course, he knew a lot about OKRs because John Doerr tells the story how he did this 90-minute presentation at the ping pong table at Google when Google was in a very tiny office in Silicon Valley. It was after they came out of the garage, the famous garage, and the photo of the garage of Larry Page and Sergey Brin. But nevertheless, they knew quite a bit about OKRs, but he still says, look, I really wish I had this book a while back. And the reason is it has so much more information. It's so packed. And by the way, we have a question here. Let me just check. Would this webinar be recorded? Yeah, we can provide a recording. This was asked by Albert. Albert, for sure, and we can send you slide decks or a slide deck of this webinar. I will provide an email at the end of this webinar, and basically we will do an exchange. We'll offer people to shoot us an email and sign up to see a live demo and talk to one of our what we call OKR Goal Advisors, if you will. Their demo. They're going to show you the demo, answer any questions about OKRs, and then we'll reward you with a deck or recording. Fair trade, more than fair, I think. But anyway, so this is what, coming back to the presentation, this is what Larry Page said. And by the way, feel free to send questions. I'll respond in time. Bill Gates wrote a review of this, and he said, look, management tips from a brilliant business leader. Now, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Bill Gates, as a business leader, right? And right now he applies his business leadership skills to his nonprofit, which has a huge impact globally on expunging all kinds of really big bad diseases. And he's doing a lot of good stuff with his money, which is very respectable. He's a professional philanthropist. But when he calls someone a brilliant business leader, that's a very significant endorsement. He wrote a review about this book. Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn, he's another really exceptional business leader and entrepreneur. Um, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Reid Hoffman. He has a really great podcast. And he wrote a review on LinkedIn that had a lot of publicity, and he also endorsed this book. And he doesn't, he works at another venture capital firm. He doesn't work with John Doerr. So this is quite an endorsement, just saying this other venture capitalist wrote this amazing book that I think all of portfolio companies that he invested in are reading. When you go to Amazon, and these snapshots for this presentation were taken maybe like a month ago or etc. Actually in April, so a couple months ago. And we didn't update it because the information is the same, but I'm sure there are more reviews and more stuff and stars. And if you go to Reid Hoffman's page, I'm sure there's a lot more than now 5,000 probably likes of this review. The bottom line is it's a really great book. John Doerr is a fantastic business leader. Brilliant, as Bill Gates called him, and there's a lot of great insight in his book. And in this presentation, I'm hoping to share with you many of those, but I still recommend to read this book because there's so much more. And by the way, John Doerr is not a friend of mine. Unfortunately, I wish I knew him. He's not paying me to endorse his book, so this is very, very pristine. Nobody's paying me for this. So, let's start with, sort of, the section is called the OKR revolution, and start with some challenges that companies have. And this is a prelude to the kinds of problems that OKRs will help you solve at your company. And by the way, typical folks who join us for these webinars or who download a lot of our white papers and content about OKRs and alignment, it's primarily CEOs and COOs at companies, and with a couple of folks who are vice presidents of people or people operations. Is sort of kind of the HR segment focusing on optimizing people performance and getting sort of the best value out of the people at your company, and providing them with a great employee experience so that it's a win-win for the organization, for people, etc. So you may be one of them, and I think you will have experienced these. So there was a research done by two famous professors at Harvard, Professor Kaplan and Norton. They're world renowned for inventing the balanced scorecard, and they deal with strategy, strategic maps, linking strategy to execution. And well, you link strategy to execution through setting objectives that are aligned and align people's personal objective or individual objectives at work to the company's strategic objectives or top corporate objectives, which in turn are teased out, if you will, from your strategic priorities, which in turn, strategic priorities are created, when you do strategic planning and design your, long-term strategy and sort of, annual strategy, as well as based on the 3 to 5 to 10 year strategy. So, these professors analyzed data and polled different companies and realized that 95% of employees at any given typical organization actually don't fully understand the company's strategy or the company's goals. Or worse yet, and these are my words, that they didn't write that, but worse yet is that part of this research, these same 95% of employees actually don't know what is their own individual objective or set of objectives at work that align to the top company objectives, which they also don't quite know. Well, as you can guess, the 5% is probably you, since you're the executive. Well, most likely, we have mostly executives on this call. CEO, COO, vice president, maybe vice president of HR, people operations, or people. You know what the company's goals are. You're the 5%. The rest actually don't quite know it. Another statistic said that the top concern is sort of 40% of the CEOs that were polled, and that was the biggest chunk, the biggest bucket or cohort, responded that the problem failure to align is the single greatest challenge to executing strategy. And then there's like, 30% answered, the next big thing, and 25% was, the next big thing or whatever. But the top one was basically the failure to align is the single big, and alignment is it may be like an MBA type of word, but if you actually, go deeper and understand what does that mean, you know, people just not like aligned and working on things that really move the needle for the company and not really working in sync towards the same objectives, right? Like, probably a famous misalignment is called, the sales and marketing alignment or misalignment. When marketing is not, producing the measurable objectives that drive the sales forward. In B2B world, it could be like leads that are qualified for sales. And that's very costly, right? That's very painful for any organization to go through. And, it's not necessarily because there's not enough competence, it's just misalignment, not clear objectives that were thought through. Another thing is 84% of companies are not using their workforce to their full potential. Corporate Executive Board, which is now part of Gartner, said that 50% of average workforce time is wasted on non-productive work. Look, these statistics are not just, sales collateral to impress people, and pulled out of thin air. These were analyzed by Harvard Business Review and professors at Harvard, by PricewaterhouseCoopers, Corporate Executive Board, now part of Gartner. These are very, very sophisticated organizations, and they're very careful with data they analyze and produce. When you look at numbers that are of this magnitude, this is very real. This is very concrete. This is no BS, right? And anybody who basically doesn't see that in their own organization, you're either doing extremely well or you got a problem and you're not seeing it. And that's even scarier. Another statistic that I would overlay on top of the prior data points is that 70% of your workforce, of your total, 70% of your P&L is basically the cost of a typical workforce. So, and that's Brookings Institute and the Society for Human Resource Management. Again, they analyze data, and basically, if you look at your typical annual expenditure, 70% goes towards your people. And if your people, per the prior slide, are not in alignment, are not working effectively, if they're not producing the kind of results that really matter to the company, but are working on the wrong things, means ineffective things, but working very efficiently, they're running very fast, but just in the wrong direction, or just not not producing overarchingly the outcomes that you need for your organization to be successful. That's very costly. That's 70% of every dollar or $100 million you spend. So what are OKRs and how do they relate to the statistics we've just discussed over the past 5-10 minutes? So I define OKRs basically as a management approach used to align everyone at your company, focus everyone's effort on what actually moves the needle, what truly matters, right? And make all progress measurable, right? So not just do stuff and just do and be busy, like being a busy bee is great, but if you're not busy on the right things, you got a problem. And a lot of progress is not measurable, but make all progress measurable so that you can achieve your top corporate objectives and actually accelerate business performance and results. Not just achieve the objectives, but accelerate. We'll talk about why you can accelerate things with OKRs. It's kind of weird, right? I mean, you probably get the point that you can achieve objectives. You set the objectives, you know when you achieve them or you don't, but how the heck do you accelerate? We'll click into that a little bit later. There was a great book written by the former senior vice president at Google's people operations, Laszlo Bock. By the way, fantastic book. It talks about OKRs. That's the point on this slide. And actually, a little story, like towards the end of the book, he talks about why he was not, vice president of HR, but vice president of people operations, or SVP rather. And he basically said that people ops signifies much more of this kind of operational, measurable, data-driven approach to taking your talent, your people at your company, and amplifying it. Like, how do you take the people that you have, that you've recruited, but make them perform at the highest level. What are the levers, the drivers, the tips and tricks that Google utilized? And then there's this Google video that everybody knows about. We have a transcription of that on our website if you just want to read it instead of spend, it's about 82 minutes long, this video. Just a couple of months ago, it was 500,000 views. And I literally updated this just before the webinar because I'm like, well, how many is it now? 20% more. I mean, the interest in OKRs is just explosive. It's just the past few years, it went from 0 views to this. And by the way, it's easy to get a lot of views when you have like a 3-minute funny video or some music video from a popular rock band. How the heck do you get 600,000? It's going to be 1 million before you know it. And it's not watched by like the majority of the population. It's not like, teenagers or consumers after work at home watching this. This is only interesting to executives and business managers. And that's the minority, not the majority of a typical organization. How do you get 600,000 of those in a few years? It's only if the topic is extremely powerful and it's attracting a tremendous amount of interest, like this huge bottled up, pent up demand. So you're not the only ones. There's 600,000 more people out there with this interest. And Google also writes on their website about OKRs in this website called Rework, regarding work. And they talk a lot about what Google does and how they use OKRs and how they optimize their workforce. Very interesting. And they said, among many other things about OKRs, that research shows that ultimately performance is higher when people are committed to their goals. And that's part of this magic formula of accelerating performance. Without goals, you're not. If you don't have objectives, and by the way, OKRs are just objectives. That's what they are. They're goals, all synonymous, right? Not to overcomplicate it or make it sound like this acronym has some special sauce or something like that. It kind of does, but it's just goals, objectives, right? Think of it simply like that. And basically, when you don't have objectives at your company, you're totally not creating the alignment and focus and realization of a higher performance. And when you are implementing those objectives, you're getting the best you can get out of your people, hands down, right? And Google talks about that. But ultimately, OKRs are just a simple tool. There are no rigid rules, right? You don't have to buy a 500-page, like GAAP accounting, right? Generally accepted accounting principles that are governed by the FASB, Financial Accounting Standards Board, which is all these global experts in accounting, or not global, US at least. And you have to have an accounting degree and a ton of many years of experience. And by the way, if you don't follow some of these rules, like the tax accounting rules, you can go to jail. There's none of that for OKRs. There's no rigid rules. It's just a few easy principles. They're adaptable and flexible and can fit your company's context. And at the end of the day, you use objectives or OKRs because the performance of your company is directly linked to the performance of your people. If you're not getting the best performance out of your people, your company doesn't have its best performance either, right? Your company is your people at the end of the day. And what kind of companies are using OKRs? And of course, a lot of it has been compiled over the years from many different sources. We talked to a lot of these companies as well when they came to us, and from our customers, companies that we've helped, etc. It's any industry, any type of company, any size, small, medium, large, public company, private company. We have clients that are all across the board. And companies, car companies like BMW, or beer companies like Anheuser-Busch, or technology companies, right, like Dropbox or Google, right, or all these other ones. And the list goes on and on and on and on. So now let's get to John Doerr and his OKR tips, because that's what this webinar is about. So we laid the context. We talked about, at a high level, the OKR revolution, who uses them, etc. Now let's talk about John Doerr's, insights. So if you read his book, he talks about how Peter Drucker, who's known as the Dean of Modern Management, if you're an MBA and a management nerd, I would say, like me, I'm a student of management. I really get passionate about best practices of managing teams, people, organizations. And he talks about the practice of management, and Peter Drucker writing about MBOs, management by objectives. And then Andy Grove at Intel took MBOs and called them Intel MBOs. He didn't even call them OKRs because OKRs were actually named by John Doerr because the Intel MBOs had this concept of an objective, and we'll talk about the definitions and the key results that you have to achieve, and that's how you measure the big objective, the big headline of an objective, what you want to do. And we'll talk about all this, not to be confusing, but John Doerr basically just named it OKRs to kind of discern and distinguish from MBOs. And he said, this is, John Doerr defining them. He said, OKRs are a management methodology that helps ensure that the company focuses efforts on the same important issues throughout the organization. Objectives and key results are a collaborative goal-setting protocol for companies, teams, and individuals. And he says that ideas are easy, but it's execution that's everything. And OKRs help with better execution. He said that you get 4 superpowers, and he writes a book around those. The focus and committing to priorities, align and connect for teamwork, the superpower of track for accountability, and stretch for the amazing. Right? I just copy pasted this from his book, and basically in summary, I would say it's simply like focus, alignment, accountability, and acceleration. Those are John Doerr's big 4 superpowers, right? And sort of biggest benefits. So let's talk about definitions as John Doerr defines it. So an objective is simply the what is to be achieved. And by the way, we will have examples of OKRs here so that it's not super confusing, kind of in abstract, and we'll get specific. But just bear with me here. Objectives are the what. They're significant, concrete, and action-oriented. They're vaccine against fuzzy thinking. And fuzzy thinking is definitely what you get without having any objectives in place. And the objective is the direction, right? And key results, they benchmark and monitor how we get to the objective. KRs should be succinct, specific, and measurable. And I can get really pedantic and academic on, sort of the definition of measurable versus quantifiable, launch the event. That's measurable because if you didn't launch it, you didn't. And if you launched it, you did. It's done, not done, complete, incomplete. That's measurable. You can measure that. It's just, two outcomes that you measure one against the other. And quantified is when you actually have a number. And of course, some of the best key results ultimately should have a number. But we'll talk about, done is better than perfect. And launching OKRs means you don't have to get perfect because it'll take you forever. And if your KRs don't sound perfect, that's okay. Just make them measurable. You don't have to quantify everything. But we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But KRs typically include hard numbers, but that's quantifiable. So the way you would, the formula for OKRs, as John Doerr says, is we want to, and then you state the objective. Could be like grow our company globally, right? Well, how do you measure growing your company globally? What does that mean? Well, that's the key result. Key result one could be like, 1 billion in sales, 300 new employees at the company, something else. Those are the results that you want at the end. That's the key result. And John Doerr talks about value proposition and benefits of OKRs. He talks about it's about achievement orientation. So if you're an achievement oriented executive or company, you want OKRs. Hands down. Get John Doerr's book and get started as soon as possible, right? We're like in the, in the first step of Q3. Don't wait, right? You don't want to get to Q4 implementing OKRs. Why? You want to get Q3, some, dings around the block, some experience. Q4, like really, push it forward. And then Q1 starts of next year with this experience under your belt. You want that, right? John Doerr also says they surface your primary goals of your company and channel your efforts in coordination. They link diverse operations, right? They basically reduce silos in your company, lending purpose and unity to the entire organization. For anyone striving for high performance in the workplace, goals are very necessary. Goals, OKRs, right? It's all synonymous. Specific hard goals produce a higher level of output. Productivity is enhanced by well-defined, challenging goals. And by the way, that is the acceleration I meant earlier. Because sometimes you set goals very low, right? And here, if you set higher goals, and when you measure them, there is a whole science to it, of course, right? But you can get better improved acceleration in your results, right? A 2-year Deloitte study found that no single factor has more impact, no single factor has more impact than clearly defined goals that are written down and shared freely. Goals create alignment, clarity, and job satisfaction. Managers become coaches, mentors, and architects. Actions and data speak louder than words. By the way, note that managers become coaches, mentors, and architects. One of the biggest benefits is that your company, all of your managers can be more effective just by you implementing OKRs and nothing else. It's truly that powerful. Setting OKRs, he talks about bottoms up versus top down. We actually call it bidirectional, right? So basically, it's not just bottoms up where everybody talks about OKRs are different because they're bottoms up. Look, even MBOs had very much this bottom up component where it's bidirectional. The top manager sets the big picture, and then all the managers work with their teams to get input, right, and tap into the collective wisdom of their team on what objectives and measurability they would set in place to help their manager and the company ultimately achieve its objective, right? So, first you start at the top and set that baseline. That's a kind of the important, first step. And then you work with team members. And that doesn't mean you accept some, sandbagging or low goal from some employee at the company. No, I mean, the manager coaches them and works with them. It's bidirectional, right? You iterate and you come up with what really is meaningful. It's not, unreasonably hard. It's not too easy. It's just right. It's a process. It's just like managing people, right? Goals can be thoroughly cascaded, heavily driven from the top, but with input from the below. He also says this phrase in the book, and by the way, I quote and paraphrase a lot of what John Doerr. So it's all John Doerr. Definitely, want to give him the copyright credit, which is what I put at the bottom. But he says you can tell people to clean up a mess, but should you be telling them which broom to use? You can't micromanage them, but you take their input. He says OKRs are a critical tool in crises, right? So whenever you need to turn things around, you need a system that can drive transformation quickly. And he talked about Operation Crush, which was amazing. He said that is the one thing that, could turn the company around and send clarity and focus throughout the entire organization about how to turn Intel around using OKRs to do Operation Crush. And that OKR was the tool that instantly created clarity, like immediately. How else would you be able to communicate to everybody what to, get, to get focused on? It was exactly OKRs. It's amazing, right? He said it's a simple tool for any company, right? He says that small companies, they're a survival tool. At mid-sized, rapidly growing companies, they're a shared language for execution and they clarify expectations. And at larger companies, OKRs are neon-lit road signs that demolish silos and enable connections among all far-flung contributors. OKRs were constant reminders of what our teams needed to be doing, and they told us precisely what we're achieving or not. If you get everybody pointing in the same direction, you maximize the results, right? Totally true. He said, I relied on OKRs to communicate more clearly and help my team get our most important work done. And he refers to them as a Swiss Army knife suited to any environment. So whatever company you are at, whatever company you're at, any size company, any type company, it's suited to any environment. So, get started or get ready after this webinar, right? Or you can email us and we can give you some guidance if you'd like, just, as a courtesy. And he also talked about not only is it a fit for any type of company, but it's also a must-have for every company. He said, I couldn't imagine there would be any other way to manage and lead a high-growth, operationally excellent company on working at Intel using OKRs, right? When he was there, he said, I can't imagine anybody not doing it. And he's basically introducing all of his portfolio companies, to this system, to this method. And by the way, I don't even want to call it a system. I mean, it lends some kind of undercurrent and sort of this kind of feeling of complicatedness. It's not. It's just if I were to give definitions to OKRs, I would just say OKRs mean, hey, go set some objectives at your company and stop flying by the seat of your pants. It's literally kill chaos and embrace clarity. That's really what OKRs are. Um, but back to John Doerr, he said companies are turning to OKRs and CFRs, and we'll talk about CFRs quite a lot. That's also a big part of his book, and they're basically like working together. It's conversations, feedback, and recognition. Conversations around your progress and your objectives. Imagine every manager talking to their team members. How are you doing on the progress? Having conversations around that. So it's not just like a goal that is sort of the set and forget mentality. No, no, no. You got to have regular check-ins on those. You got to provide feedback on the progress, right? There's a lot of research about organizational behavior, management best practices. You got to provide recognition on the progress. That's what make OKRs work. And these are tools for cultural change. Goal alignment, transparency, check-ins, coaching, and development are replacing the hierarchical structure. On transparency of goals, research shows that public goals, right, when they're transparent throughout the company, are more likely to be attained than goals that are held in private. Simply flipping the switch to open, right, publicly viewed, lifts achievement across the board. And in an OKR system, the most junior staff can look at everyone's goals, even up to the CEO's goals, right? And even in our software, and we make software for managing OKRs at scale, kind of centralizing, making it super easy to implement and use and track them and measure them. We enable you, if you embrace transparency, to make all the goals transparent. And some goals you don't make transparent, right? If you have a goal that's private, or you don't make that transparent. But OKRs should just be the kinds of goals that you want people to see, that inspire people and align people. You finally say, listen, if you don't set objectives and measure the progress, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? You can't manage what you don't measure. Everybody does OKRs was another point from John Doerr. One of the essential qualities of OKRs is everybody does them, everybody. And I showed you the logos of types of companies, right? Beer company, car company, etc. Talks about that here. Regardless of the size of your company or its life stage, it's for all of you, right? In sum, objectives and key results are a potent, proven force for operating excellence. For Google, so why not for you? That's a good question as you're here. If you're not getting ready to start thinking about implementing OKRs at your company after this webinar, I will have completely failed. So he said one other thing is it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not some kind of silver bullet. It's a powerful, clear, and empowering communication tool. Communication because you're communicating what's important and priority. To get transparency, some accountability, and a lot of enthusiasm about what it is that's really important. This is nothing more than a system to prioritize and communicate and to get everybody's efforts focused on the few things that really matter most. If the fundamentals of strong leadership and sound judgment are in place, OKRs can guide you to the mountaintop, right? It's amazing, right? Like, so if you have good leadership at your company and strong, and sound judgment, right, to make decisions, to set clear objectives, OKRs will get you really far, in a much better way than not having goals or OKRs. He also said that the CEO's commitment to OKRs is absolutely critical. So we've seen before where, the CEO is like, oh, let's just like implement them and I'll throw it, to my managers to get it going. It doesn't work like that. So if you have a CEO who doesn't care and he just wants OKRs to take off all by themselves, that's not going to happen. He said they require a public commitment by leadership in word and in deed, right? Supporting them in word and actually using it, the system. He said the system works provided the leadership of the company embraces it. If the CEO of the company doesn't believe in OKRs and won't pursue them, I suggest you not try it. That's pretty powerful. If the leader of the organization or the team sets personal OKRs as well as group OKRs, I dare say this is the most powerful tool you can have to achieve operating excellence and high performance in your organization. And I'm really passionate myself about best practices of effective management of companies and people. And I agree with John Doerr that if you're not setting objectives. That's completely it's just inefficient and ineffective, right? Like we've created this concept called the cycle of effective management that I've extracted and summarized from probably over 50 different books on management, from basic ones like the 1 minute management to even some concepts from management for dummies or leadership for dummies, or books like the Effective Manager from Peter Drucker, etc. But there are just a few consistent steps in the cycle of effectively managing a team that are universal, and I'll show them to you later. But setting objectives is the first one. It's the first one. John Doerr said, here are the things to keep in mind. The key for any team or any group is that you use this on a regular written basis. Over the course of several periods, you and your team can get much better, right? He's right. Like sometimes it takes, he said in his book, I think like 5 or 6 quarters, over a year, to really get better at it. And by the way, this kind of mirrors like how it takes quite some time to become good at being a manager, right? Remember yourself when the first time ever you started managing someone. It was kind of like not natural, right? You had to like learn and understand, like, how do I manage a person? Like, what do I do? Um, and it takes time to get good at managing, right? It's just, it's muscle memory and it's experience. It's just the same with OKRs. It's no different. You can't expect to be great at setting objectives and tracking them well on day one. It takes time. So the key is just to get started, right? There's that phrase from Lao Tzu that, a 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step, something like that, right? I'm probably messing up not paraphrasing it too well. But so he also says, look, if your Salesforce has a number, a lot of people say that, your OKRs are successful if you achieve 70% of your key results, or you're 70% there. That's not true. And John Doerr says, look, if you have a sales number you have to hit, then you have to hit it. And that doesn't need to be aspirational or moonshot. But there are some OKRs that Google used for, creating a self-driving cars that are very, very aggressive. Like, let's build a self-driving car, like in the next, whatever, year, 2 years, 3 years. And like, that's like a moonshot. But that one, if you don't hit it and you build part of that car and you still can continue on it, you're still happy, right? So it depends. Some goals are aspirational and some are operational. They need to get done. And he said, look, OKRs are a tool to help you, right? They're not there to make things difficult. They're not chains or blinders. They're adaptable and are meant to be helpful guardrails. And they're not the only thing you do, but what you must do, right? You do other things, but they're the ones that, like, when the quarter is over, we must accomplish these, right? They're the few things that, come hell or high water, we have to get them done. And it's all about focus. He said OKRs are not everything that is happening at the entire company. And the sum of OKRs is not a work order for the entire organization. They're just the absolute key things we must focus on, as I mentioned on the prior slide. They must get done. These are the things that you, the leaders of the company and the contributors, have decided really matter. Like, they really matter. We must get them done. These are the things where we want special focus or intention, and attention as well. What, how, and when? Look, it may make sense to ease into OKRs. Remember, I said it could take, a year or a year and a half to build up that experience of using them really well. It may take a couple of quarters before you're starting to write quantified KRs with metrics that are really smart. It just takes time, right? But if you don't start, you won't get there, and you're basically always 5 or 6 quarters behind being in that perfect state of using objectives and being more effective as a manager across all of your managers in your entire corporate hierarchy. So the sooner you start, the better. There's no religion and no one size fits all, right? Again, it's not gap accounting. The best OKR cadence is the one that fits the context and culture of your business. So look, some people think like it's too loose. No, it's not. It just gives you a system and guardrails, and just says, more importantly than anything, set clear objectives and get going, because that's going to be better for your organization. Bill Gates thinks that. Andy Grove, from whom John Doerr learned originally how to use OKRs, he said, less is more. Don't have too many OKRs. Set goals from the bottom up. No dictating. Stay flexible. Dare to fail, right? Set aggressive goals, right? But have an agreement with your manager that, like, this one is very aspirational. Let's see what happens. It's a tool, not a weapon. And be patient, right? Be resolute. Go do it. Don't give up. And, done is done is better than perfect, right? And perfect is the enemy of good enough. Just get started. By the way, these are all quotes from someone else. I didn't just want to give credit. Now let's talk about CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition. Due to the well-documented failings of annual performance reviews, we need a new model to manage people and for human resources for people. The transformational system, the contemporary alternative to reviews, is continuous performance management, and it's basically implemented with an instrument called conversations, feedback, and recognition. What CFRs are check-ins during which you have, conversations around progress, feedback on progress, which is kind of coaching, right? It is coaching, and recognition for good work done. And recognition is critical. If you read The 1 Minute Manager by was it Marcus Buckingham? The 1 Minute Manager is just the most fundamental short book on managing. The first one anyone should read is They Become a Manager. And the big thing there was that set objectives and look proactively for ways to recognize people. Don't just recognize, but actually proactively seek out opportunities to recognize, because it has incredible impact. And this has been studied like again and again in organizational behavior and organizational psychology, etc. So CFR. So on question of linking OKRs to compensation, let me just summarize everything for you. The bottom line is, it's some people say don't link OKRs to compensation at all. Some other people say like no, like just you have to link every goal to compensation directly. The truth is in the middle, and it's basically yes, like you should definitely like not link your OKRs 100% to compensation, or rather, let me restate that: a compensation should not be 100% as a function of your achieving or not achieving your goals. So if you achieve 80% of your goals, you shouldn't get 80% of your I don't know, promotion or comp or bonus or even your salary, right? Like, of course that'd be crazy, but because some of them you want to set aspirationally and not make people afraid of failing. So it shouldn't be 100% a function of your progress of your OKRs. But it should also not be the case for most organizations that you should completely not link your goals to compensation. You can do that, right? I mean, we can sit here and discuss the book Drive by Daniel Pink and how people it's not all about compensation. Sure. But I think the best practice and what really works and has been studied well is that, look, I mean, some of your goal achievement should be, a fifth or a third slice of the pie of a contribution towards the decision of your compensation. And effective managers and executives know how to do it right. And compensation conversations should be completely separate from your regular conversations on OKRs. So let me give you a couple more things, in context of what John Doerr talks about. So let's talk about goals examples really quickly. We have, 15 minutes left here. We should run quickly, and I'll speed up. But look, I mean, an example of OKRs. An objective could be create an exceptional customer experience. But then you're like, if that's an objective, like, where's the number? Like, what the heck does that mean? Well, that's what key results are for, right? Instead of saying my objective is to create an exceptional customer experience, or increase our NPS score to 9, net promoter score or customer satisfaction score to 90% or whatever it is, right? Your objectives instead is big picture and high level, and also pretty inspirational, which is part of the criteria that John Doerr wants you to have on setting OKR. So create an exceptional customer experience does that. I feel good about that. We care deeply at this company about customers. Our number one of 10 corporate values and principles is always delighting customers and doing whatever it takes to make our customers not just satisfied, but like beyond satisfied, like really delighted with the service and the product, etc. And just putting a number and having a goal saying improve customer satisfaction to 90%, it's good. But saying create an exceptional customer experience as backed by 3 key results right here is better, right? There's multiple things I can say, the key results we want, that taken together produce this objective, success in our objective of creating exceptional customer experience. There are many ways to wordsmith to write your OKRs, right? So there's no one way. You can say, look, an objective could be recruit 5 great people and improve our talent. Or an objective could be like, create an amazing, culture with great people, right? whatever you want to say that's inspirational is great. And key results should be the measurable parts, right? First of all, interview 10 qualified candidates, hire 5 new employees, improve the employee NPS score. Or it could be just simply one key result, recruit 5 new employees whose, NPS score after 3 months on the job should be 9. That just, could be something like that, right? There are many ways you can write this, but this is typically the traditional OKR way. So starting to use OKRs, first of all, we talked about less is more from Andy Grove's sort of playbook on OKRs. He said, we must realize that if we try to focus on everything, we focus on nothing. So OKRs, you should have just a few of them, a few objectives and a few key results. The key in using OKRs is to set and use them frequently. If you just set and forget, you set a goal for a year, nobody thinks about it. That's the problem with like old school approach to just setting goals. You have to set quarterly OKRs, and quarterly because a quarter is there for a reason. There's a reason there's public companies report their earnings quarterly, not monthly, not annually, not every 6 months. Is that perfect conditioned business cadence, right? But you check in on them, right? You set them quarterly. You set the results you want for the quarter and for the year as well, by the way, in 4 quarters in a year. But you check in on them once a week. There are 12 to 13 weeks in a quarter. You spend 5 minutes per week to update your manager on where you stand. The manager takes 5 minutes to review your response, where you stand on your 3 key objectives, or anything else kind of that you want to report, like any complications or bottlenecks or roadblocks or successes or whatever. You want to do that weekly. It takes a few minutes. But the return on investment on that 5 minutes is exponential, right? It's proven again and again. Deloitte said that, your company, when you set goals more frequently than once a year, and the more frequent the cadence, the more return on investment on your company being, performing better and accelerating results, ultimately them finding you being in the top quartile of your business performance in your industry. Gallup did a study that when you do these regular check-ins on your objectives, and don't just set and forget, but check in on objectives regularly and provide feedback. So don't just like read that, you're at 50% progress on objective 1 and on objective 2, you're at 80% progress. Great. And you move on. But instead, you review the progress and provide feedback. By the way, that's what managers should be doing. If it's a manager and they're not providing feedback, why do you need a manager? You just have, all the completely flat organization sending their updates to the CEO, and with no feedback, you just skim the data and move on. But that doesn't work. That, your company will go nowhere. So when they provide feedback alongside with check-ins on these progresses, that is the most powerful impact on your organization, the employees' production, productivity, and effectiveness and results at work. How many should you have? We talked about less is more. 3 to 5 quarterly objectives, 3 to 5 key results per each O being an objective. There are 3 keys to success with using OKRs. And by the way, frankly, with any management decision at your company, use your discretion, apply some common sense. And by the way, there's this great quote that common sense is not so common. It's very unfortunate, but I think majority of you probably will agree with me every day that you see that often. I don't know, at work, on the streets. People don't use their common sense a lot. And not to sound cynical, so apply that. And walk before you run. I could probably, say, don't force a square peg into a round hole and try to overcomplicate your key results, but that probably goes under common sense. Luke Gerstner, who was a famous CEO who turned IBM around, he said, don't mistake activity with results. Being busy and doing a lot of tasks, if you're using task management tools, that is, the fastest way I see companies become extremely busy, but without any measurability of whether they're producing real results until it's a quarter too late. Everybody has a task board and some project management or task management tool, and they have a million tasks and all these cards that they're moving around in the Kanban board, and they're busy, busy, busy bees, right? And there's this great quote. It's like, don't just be busy, so are the ants, right? Like anybody can be busy, but what are you actually setting objectives and producing results that are meaningful towards those objectives that are measurable? So a task is something you do. Don't confuse that with objectives. Being busy, doing activities, that's a task. A project is many different tasks, right? But a goal is it's an outcome at the end of all of those projects, all of those tasks. When you climbed out the mountain, you did a lot of tasks climbing there, but at the end you've achieved the top. That's the result you wanted. That's why you were climbing in the first place. That's why you were doing all these busy tasks. Um, you can have to-do lists, but that's not a goal. Putting things on a task list, that's not a goal. uh, Putting all kinds of things on your calendar, those aren't goals. They may be deliverables or projects or tasks. Those aren't goals. Putting things in any of these task management tools that are popular today, or project management like Microsoft's project, these are all good, the right tool for the job, right? For managing tasks, sure. For managing, projects and dependencies, sure. But if you want to manage objectives, that's a completely different thing. That's high level above all of these. That's what managers use. So you don't micromanage with tasks. You don't micromanage with projects or whatever. Or I don't know, maybe that's not micromanagement either, but managing people, you set objectives and you help them achieve it. You can create alignment. We have this thing we call visual goal alignment. It's a goal chart. It looks like it's an organizational textbook approach kind of org chart. It's not an org chart, it's a goal chart, because you can have cross alignment of goals from one team to another team, sales aligned to marketing, right? You can have goals and they cascade down, or these roll up or contribute up to the bigger goal, and their contribution impacts the progress bar of the goal to which they align and contribute. It's really magical stuff. It's really amazing stuff. With having goals, you can start every meeting by checking in the progress and OKRs. So your meetings are less vacuous. They're not, fuzzy thinking that John Doerr talked about. They're not the kind of meetings that people leave and say, "What did we even talk about?" They have, you discuss real objectives, right? You discuss real results you want to achieve on those objectives. Where are we? Where do we stand? And by the way, these are screenshots from our own product. But the point is that you start meetings and have meetings where you do discuss objectives, not just nothing. You identify problems early because you check in weekly. There are 12 weeks. Couple of weeks into the quarter, you can see when you're behind on the objectives that you really must achieve. So you do not end up finding out a quarter too late, because you can't turn that ship around if it's the last 2 weeks of the quarter. But majority of companies, believe it or not, a lot of the managers you have at your company, they don't have objectives. They don't have any regular check-ins. They don't know when to turn the ship around. How can your company be productive, effective, high performance if that's not really happening throughout your entire corporate hierarchy, right? Remember that 70% we talked about earlier in the presentation? Remember the 95% we talked about from Harvard Business Review? Those are all the problems that are hitting you when you don't have objectives, when you're not clearly measuring as the time goes, and not being proactive, because you're only being reactive and you're not seeing what's at risk, what's in the red, like we show here in the progress bar. This again is from our product. Cross-functional alignment, collaboration, when teams can link to each other and recognize each other and praise them. Pretty cool stuff. And ultimately, this is the cycle of effective management that I promised you. Really, all of the management best practices boil down pretty much to these 5. First and foremost, you set objectives. And by the way, this is not about like leadership and setting great example and being a hard worker and having great communication skills. This is the more kind of tactical, tangible, day-to-day effective management tactics, right? Number 1, you got to set clear goals, OKRs, agile goals, right? That you can quickly change and check in on, not once a year set and forget. That's OKRs. OKRs are agile goals. You got to do regular one-on-one check-ins. These are CFRs, the conversations, feedback, and recognition. One-on-one check-in, you check in on the progress. Part of that you do is feedback and try to be proactive, like the 1-Minute Manager book, at identifying things to recognize, and that's the 4th piece. And lastly, this is the modernized version, the review snapshots, not the annual review that everybody hates, that's ineffective, but the review snapshots, the more kind of formalized summary of your progress over the quarter. You've had these regular quarterly, weekly check-ins for 5 minutes, and now at the end of the quarter, they're all summarized and the progress is snapshotted, and then people know where they stand and what the feedback, the key takeaways of the feedback and coaching they got throughout the quarter. That's what our product actually does. And this is not a presentation about our product, so you don't get to see a lot of the magic that our product does to help you do all these 5 things easily and at scale. But that's what you're supposed to do, right? You can, product or not, you can do it more manually, but you got to do these things to be an effective manager. And hopefully your managers at your companies are doing a lot of these things. Otherwise, as one of our customers, he's a CEO of about a 800-person company. He says that, why would he be paying his managers the market salary for managers and managing people if they're not actually setting clear objectives? Then you don't need a manager. You can just, CEO can say, I'll set the objectives, go do them, and just send me updates. Like, you need people there to do these conversations, feedback, checking in on the goals, course correcting on a weekly basis, recognizing people. It's all the things that a CEO cannot do at scale if you have 800 people, right? Or even 50 people or 100 people, right? If you have only 10 people in your company, maybe that's not really an issue. So with 3 minutes left till the end, any questions? So if you have any questions, please populate them in here in the questions box. I see somebody raise their hand, but I don't see the question. So if you could please put them in the question box down below. You can type it in and I can answer. Or you can email us at cdemo@Atiim. Atiim is spelled with 2 I's for including individuals, but it means a team, a players, a game. The best people you can have, the best alignment, the best effort. A, letter A for, you get an A for it. So cdemo@Atiim. You can ask us questions, but you can also say hi in the subject line and nothing else. And one of our OKR goal advisors will follow up to schedule a demo, and we'll be happy in return for a demo, answer any questions, send you a recording, give you some advice on OKR, some very basic consultation, or refer you to one of our partners who are OKR experts. They can, come to your office and do a 1-day training, etc., and help you set up your OKRs. You can go to one of our websites, for example, okr-examples.com, or even on our own website, atiim.com. You can learn about OKRs and examples. So I have a question here. How do you deal with managers, particularly technology managers, who use task management and can't tell the difference between OKR and tasks? That's a really good question. I mean, again, if you're a manager, you really should be expected to understand the difference between what's a task, I don't know, build this piece of the product, and what is the, objective? The objective is, why are you building this piece of the product? Like, what is it ultimately you're trying to achieve? In and of itself, a task in a task management tool is not the ultimate objective you're looking to achieve. An objective is something bigger. It may be to launch a new product to your customers, or maybe to significantly improve your product, or maybe you can measure it in terms of helping the sales team this quarter to increase their sales by 30% or 100%, right? But it's rarely something that big, but it can be if they want to link up to helping sales. But that's a big difference, and managers really should study up on managing with objectives and OKRs. Even pick up the Measure What Matters book, and that may be, to your question here, that may be the answer. Grab that book, right, and give it to your managers. They will be better managers, right? It's a great book to give away to your whole entire organization at a all hands on meeting. So hopefully that helps. But definitely, just doing tasks and being busy that's not achieving objectives. Sure. So any other questions? Or, if anybody has any questions, you can always email us, cdemo, or you can email us at hello at atiim.com, etc. By the way, these are all the image sources. I think we got most of them. I just want to make sure we're not taking anyone's images without giving them the copyright and trademark, and making sure that we're following all those rules on that. But hopefully this was helpful, and if you have any questions, email us. In the meantime, have an amazing rest of the day. Thanks so much. Bye bye.